Fine, we'll talk about the THEA1200. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Headset-ting, the high score, our virtual reality arcade.
We have uranium-235 at home, an RBMK nuclear reactor control computer built from scratch.
The answer is yes. But what were the questions? We respond to Retro Games Ltd's responses to important questions from the community about the THEA1200.
And a surprising hardware update for the Sony PlayStation, and a surprising operating system update for the Atari Jaguar coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 18th of July, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hi, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Nerds.
I'm Dave. That was Jason. Also with us.
I'm Chris, not a nerd. Guess I'm a nerd. Otherwise I wouldn't be here.
You were just talking about your model train aspirations, Chris.
Oh, it's true. It's true. It's going nowhere fast. Choo-choo and all that. Yes, never enough space. It's going to take up the entire garage, the entire garden.
Any of us can deny being nerds. I don't think that's possible that we could say with a straight face that we're not nerds or geeks or whatever the right word for it is.
It's true.
Have you had a good week?
Yeah, not bad. Still haven't beaten Outrun, but anyway, get in there.
You'll get there. Keep going.
Soon.
Keep going. See,
I
once
got to
you beat
stage
it.
5. I did get to stage 5 today, shortly before recording. So yeah, I'm happy.
I don't think you can be too far away from beating it.
No,
I don't
I'll
think
get
so.
there. I'll get there.
And any progress, Jason, on picking a game that both of us will, both Chris and I will dislike?
Okay, I thought that was more of a community nomination thing. So if anything, the onus is on me to mention more games and see what sticks or sticks in people's craws.
Maybe the community can help you find one. They need to find something that you like that Chris doesn't and I don't like, and that's difficult.
Yeah.
And that can be objective. We should get right into it, though, because there's lots to discuss today.
Let's do it.
There is nothing like walking into an arcade and soaking up the ambience. 2 or 3 arcade machines blaring out their track sounds or the game music, they might clash with each other, but when there's dozens, it makes something wonderful, an orchestra of them. And the lights and the darkness and the glowing marquees, it is stepping into another world. And when I was a kid, there's nothing like it. The last arcade I was at was the Arcade Archive, part of the Retro Collective, and they've managed to pull it off. There it is. It's just like stepping into an arcade from the early 90s, apart from I'm old and broken, and my reactions don't seem to be the same. Although, they've got one thing wrong, which is the machines work properly, and the screens don't look as if they're smeared in Vaseline, and the buttons all work. And the control panels aren't wobbling and loose. It's all in top condition. But it's a long way away. There are others in the UK, like Arcade Club, for example, and there's arcade bars and so on. But I couldn't just decide to do it right now. I couldn't just decide to say, sorry guys, forget the podcast, I'm going to go to an arcade right now. Until Rave, and thanks to a rather unusual username for later on in the show, Nuclear Silo for Sale, for submitting this. It's a little bit of a serendipity there. I'm going to go into a bit of detail later to tell you how this works and what you need. But the basics are, it's a PC-based virtual reality experience, creating a virtual arcade with loads of machines. In fact, there's over 1,000 different games and cabinets supported. You can wander around in it and it looks great. You're surrounded by the lights and the sound. And unlike what I had expected, all the cabs are running when you see them. So you can look around and you can see all the cabs, and you can see them working. You can find out what you want to play, just like you would do in an arcade by wandering around and seeing the machines from the artwork and the attract noises and the attract screens and the marquees and all the rest of it, just like you would do in an arcade, unlike anything else, because anything else you'd be using a menu to select the things. And that makes it properly like an arcade. What do you think, guys? Would you like to try it? Do you have a VR headset?
Yeah, things like this, I'd give it a go. And while I could plug in my PSVR to my PC, because that does work, it's actually not a great experience because you don't get the full motion. Won't bore you with the details. So this just seems like another justification to get myself a Quest, Dave.
Well, go ahead and buy it then. Stick the order in right now.
Yeah.
Jason?
I think I've mentioned I have a pretty long-standing aversion to VR headsets. I don't see anything good happening in my life if I really did find that I really like this kind of thing. But this does seem like it could be a fun project to visit. So I do feel like if I was at an expo or a party where the option to puff and pass this experience existed, I might in fact want to try it out.
Yeah, I don't think this is enough to compel me to go out and buy a VR headset just for this right now. But if I had one, I would definitely be putting this on because I love the idea of wandering around an arcade. We can play these games, but there's nothing like the ambience of actually being there, nothing like the experience of actually being in the arcade. And that's where I wonder, could this pull it off? I know when I visited the cave, it was great just walking in and sitting down. Never mind touching it, just being there. So I'll tell you a bit about how it works. It's actually just a front end. I say just, I shouldn't use the word just here because it's quite a massive achievement, but it is a front end. It's wrapping around existing stuff. It uses the MUVR framework, and that in turn uses RetroArch, which in turn uses things like MAME and Final Burn Neo to run the games. So it's using established emulation to do it. The dynamic texture pipeline is a clever part. And so instead of RetroArch outputting the game video to your actual computer monitor, Rave, that's the name of it, Rave intercepts the video feed and instantly projects that live video stream onto the 3D polygon model of the virtual cabinet screen. So all these cabinets that you see all of them and you see what's on the screens of them at the time. Although, when you wander around, it's not every machine being emulated at once. It's actually looping videos of the attract mode, which is all you need, because that's all they would be doing. Unless it's going to somehow put real people in there and show you what they're playing on it. But when you stand that or even sit down, because it's got the things like the Star Wars cockpit one, it'll seamlessly switch to an emulation instead of it. So Rave comes with no ROMs, so there shouldn't be any legal worries about its distribution, I think. That's the kind of what seems to have been settled on. If you don't supply any ROMs, if you're just the engine, you seem to be okay, generally. It supports Windows PCs only for now. There's no Apple Macintosh and there's no Linux, and it's not in the plans for now. It runs on Unity, so Unity would be possible to use in other systems, but it uses TechnoParrot, which ties it to Windows, as well as other things as well. And it's also too demanding to be run on a headset alone. No hope of this being run on the what's the number 3, the one you mentioned, the Gear.
Just the Quest 2 and Quest 3 are both standalone, or can be plugged into a PC. So yeah.
So you would need to plug those into the PC. You couldn't use them standalone. They wouldn't be powerful enough. So I'm afraid you have to stick with Windows, and you're looking at an NVIDIA 3060 or equivalent or better, and a 10th generation Gen i7 or Ryzen 7. So yeah, that's not easy to run. Those are high-end stuff. And this makes me think back to almost 30 years ago, to the beginnings of MAME and other arcade emulation, which needed a machine with quite a bit of poke to do some of the arcade machines. I remember, in fact, Callus. Callus is the Capcom emulator, which I played tons for games like Knights of the Round, never played Street Fighter 2 in it, and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. And that needed a lot of power. That needed a decent machine to play them. So we're right back, funnily enough, where we were all those years ago, with emulation back needing high-end hardware. I mean, I remember Killer Instinct, and Killer Instinct just didn't run. It was a slideshow. That was a CHT-based game. And that was one of the not quite Will It Run Crisis, but that's what I remember for emulations being Will It Run Crisis, Will It Run Killer Instinct. So I'm quite amused because we now have these incredibly inexpensive system-on-a-chip systems. I guess we'll mention one later on today. These incredibly inexpensive system-on-a-chip systems that can emulate the whole lot fine in just a handheld. But to do this form of emulation, we need incredibly complex hardware. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I like this project. It reminds me of, I don't know if you remember the VR Bedroom, which was similar to this. Yes. It was doing the rounds a few years ago. And not that kind of VR bedroom, by the way. But a teenage bedroom from the 80s, or our perception now of what an 80s
no UV light then
looked like. No. And you had customizable posters on the wall, and you had a CRT TV with a VHS player for watching your movies. And if you watched a movie file, it would play through that with the, and same with the games. You could plug in different consoles, throw a cart in, and the emulation would kick in to play the game. So it's like similar to this. It's just a layer over the top of existing emulation or media players. But, you know, when you got things like, you've even got a spot of screen glare in the corner, depending on the time of day in the bedroom, it's fantastic. I love this kind of stuff. But I've never been bothered to get it working for myself yet. So, and with these PC specs, it ain't going to happen on this project either, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's no one's fault. It's just what it needs to do. It's doing an awful lot of work in the background, so that's why it needs that. What do you reckon, Jason?
It'll be interesting to see this tension, because like this is a recreation of a very familiar experience, which you can more or less have this. Like, you know, as you mentioned, there are arcades that exist, but you know, it has the advantage of being deployable anywhere, enjoyable anywhere. But it is, you know, it is a thing that more or less, you know, could have been in the real world. Is that what VR ends up being more about, rather than, you know, something that's just completely alien, you know, could only exist in that world? Or will we kind of see polarization? You projects are only either this is a real thing that really happened and you just get to go back, and, you know, you get to walk on the surface of Pluto, or, you know, whatever.
Some of the comments about it have talked about multiplayer, and not just Double Dragon 2 player. They mean multiplayer as in there'll be an arcade and the three of us might habitually go to this arcade, and we'll say, I'll see you on Tuesday at 7:00, and we'll go and we'll meet each other virtually in the arcade and walk about the same arcade. And I can see you playing 1943, Jason, and we'll team up for a game of Cadillacs and dinosaurs. Well,
and that was always the promise of things like Second Life, right? I mean, you know, people have been trying to create those spaces where you could have those types of, you know, it's, you know, it's just the shared side-by-side experience of doing your thing in this virtual world. So, yeah, that feels like a constant.
Yeah, I wonder if Second Life was that side of things as the priority, and this is the other way around. That's been kind of tacked on. So I wonder if that's how maybe it'll kind of catch on. It certainly does appeal, the idea of, I don't know, someone who lives far away from you now, you never met in person, you can't meet in person, saying, let's go to the arcade together. And you can go and you can play games on your own, you can play games together. That sounds like fun. It is available now to download and play. It's just had a release of version 0.83. So thank you to the creator, GT Computers, for making this. And if you do have a VR headset, I'd love, and you have a beefy enough computer to do it, then do give us a try. Let us know in the comments how you feel it is. Does it feel like a real arcade? Can you kid yourself on to think you are somewhere else? I'd love to hear about that. We are sponsored this week, thank you very much, by PCBWay.com. PCBWay make PCBs, but many other things as well. They'll do CNC milling, and as I found out, they will do high-quality resin 3D prints, which don't look like 3D prints that I've seen before. I got them made for my server, a NAS server at home, to mount the fans onto what should have been a blade server into a PC case. It did really well for that. But one thing we like about PCBWay, among all the various things we do, is the shared project library. And Jason, as is usual, you've had a look around the shared project library. What have you dug out? Yeah,
there's some fun ones this time around. There's the Pathfinder, which is a DIY digital map device powered by the Unihiker M10 board. Basically, this is a small, compact touchscreen, and there's a wheel and a D-pad on it. Essentially, the creator was trying to solve the problem of what happens if your map application, you know, can't get access to data. Wouldn't it be nice to just have a device that has the maps pre-downloaded, and you can work through it on that? So Unihiker-based Pathfinder board.
Because the idea of taking a mobile phone out, we could do that into the wilds, just sounds so fragile. You get there, it doesn't work, and that's it. Oh, I don't work, that's it. Can't get data.
And a couple of fun throwback RAM projects. One is the RAM Pager, a banked RAM expansion for the KIM-1. That was the original single board computer for the 6502 processor. The board supports up to 1 megabyte. It says that's 3 orders of magnitude above the original 1,152 bytes of memory, mapping it all to a 4K window. Nice to see a KIM-1 project up there. And kind of the inevitable circle of life. At one point, maybe 20 years ago, people were literally throwing away fistfuls of 30-pin parity RAM sims. But today, you may need to make your own. And there is, in fact, a board that is a 16 meg 30-pin RAM with parity board, so you can solder up your own Sims if you need to, and you really might.
I've done that. I've had to do that, yeah.
Really?
What I found was that the top spec ones, the ones that were too expensive for anyone to own, you just can't find those anywhere. You can find the ones you don't want, but you can't find the top spec ones. But thank you very much, PCBWay, for sponsoring us this week. If you do want to sponsor an upcoming episode of This Week in Retro, you would write to, Chris, where would you write to?
You'd write to THEA at thisweekinretro.com.
Fantastic. And I noticed a few positive comments about the idea of us having a physical address, so I've got some ideas in my head. Leave that one with me.
So before computers and computing devices were sold as what they're used for today, which is primarily cat videos, gambling, and shopping in some order or other, there was a lot of emphasis in marketing made on two key and related capabilities. One was the ability to make the kinds of fast calculations and signal processing that are necessary to create, accurate simulations of some natural process. And the other was to communicate with other and possibly dumber machines through the use of I/O ports and internal expansion slots and headers and the like. Now, simulating the outcome of a crucial World War II battle while slightly changing some of the inputs, the weather, let's say, or operating as the central hub of an automated home, controlling your lights and drapes and heating and so forth, either on schedule or on user command. That's why so much of early computing was geared around coming up with fast and reliable ways to do advanced math, because you can't just do matrix algebra out of the box on any of these machines, especially because a lot of early CPUs don't come close to even having integrated multiplier divide operations. So first you got to build those up, and then you work on to, polar coordinate manipulation and so on and so forth. And that is why I picked G7VFY's submission this week about a group of individuals who are on a multi-year quest to build their own working scale simulation of the RBMK fission nuclear reactor control setup. Because honestly, it's tough to get more retro than the idea of being really interested in the connection between personal computing power and nuclear reactors. And I mean that because the public domain nuclear reactor control simulation was a staple of educational software across many platforms, and an early Atari title for its home computer line was Scram, so named for the emergency shutdown procedure, which is an acronym, or more likely a backronym, for Safety Control Rod Axeman. So nuclear reactors, it's sometimes known nuclear power plant. It's one of those basic games that we assume that was on every educational computer across the US and Canada. Did you guys ever run across this?
I should have done, because it turns out when I've done a little bit of looking, it was here at the time. I didn't run across it, but it was on every British micro as far as I can see. There was even an isometric game based on a nuclear reactor too, along the same lines, an action game. But the one you're talking about is obviously a business simulator, like ice cream stand, like all the rest of it.
Yeah.
That kind of idea, if I've got the right end of the stick. But I think there was even post-Chernobyl versions of it that inspired more.
Well, yeah, we get an uptick in that kind of thing. Chris, did you ever run across?
No, I never come across this.
Yeah. But yes.
Should we mention Homer Simpson here? I feel as if I've just realised that this is what Homer Simpson does for a living, and we're not mentioning him.
No. This channel is not themed around Simpsons lore, but is called the Chernobyl family. It's a pair from Ukraine and Slovakia who say that they live on the border of the Chernobyl zone, which, as they put it, where life is a mix of high technology and a harsh environment, all spiced with a touch of surrealism. Now, there is a lot of media out there about the history and the present of the Chernobyl disaster, and their channel has quite a wide range of that material. But this is going a level deeper in that they are recreating the kind of industrial, purpose-built hardware which only a handful of experts would ever have needed to know about or learn to operate, Homer Simpson notwithstanding. The first leg of this project was published in early February, and they've been busy this month advancing the project quite a bit further. First, they rebuilt the keyboard-driven control panels that you need to run the reactor, and now they are building a simulation of the computer that the control panel communicates with, known as Scala. As they describe it, quote, "Our simulator can process thousands of reactor parameters. It allows us to enter real Scala request codes, retrieve values, check warning and emergency set points, monitor individual reactor channels, launch programs, and investigate potentially dangerous conditions inside the reactor core," unquote. And to be clear, they have not built the actual reactor core. They're just doing all the support stuff around it. Those operator keyboard stations are as purpose-built as it gets. There's a variety of multi-character codes used to send requests or inquiries to the Scala computer, and the feedback is also pretty sparse. It's not a big, wall of, widescreen, plasma panels. These are like 16-segment little character displays, which generate the numbers and the characters that come back. And as we were preparing the story, we got a tip from the channel host himself that they have just released a new video where they're simulating the one wall-mounted readout that has this cluster of dozens of data points, basically just blinking lights that each represent an issue. As he puts it, quote, "We can now display channels with lower excessive coolant flow, high gas temperature, reduced boiling crisis margin, excessive power, and other selected conditions. The system processes the parameters of every channel, presents the result as a visual map of the reactor core," unquote, all of which makes the PET ski graphics of nuclear power plant look positively quaint. The deep level of resourcefulness and research involved in digging up spares of these 50-year-old pieces of equipment, creating modern replacements when necessary, and the deep domain knowledge necessary to make it all talk to one another is really astounding. Now, this is not a energy transition policy show, but suffice it to say, there are many and varied opinions about the construction and operation of fission nuclear reactors for home and industrial use. Looking back, I would say there's no shortage of both interest and anxiety about fission reactors through the first half of the 1980s. And then, yes, the Chernobyl disaster kind of ramps up the latter portion of that equation, and you do get that range of new games and simulations to catch that wave of, shall we say, heightened attention. But in any case, designing a fully functional, or fully functional aside from the actual nuclear reactor and turbine and all that jazz bits, RBMK control system, that's a whole new level of dedication to the bit. And mind you, this channel and this project, these are quite popular. It is interesting, isn't it? Like, which of these super niche projects catch on? When I think of some of the most iconic and high traffic videos in the broader retro tech scene, I typically think of things that represent on some level something that lots of people could watch and say, well, gosh, watching that did take a lot of care and patience, but if I put my mind to it, maybe I also could repair a slide projector or disassemble and clean that classic camera lens or restore to full function a Commodore 64 that's been buried in a 57 Chevy in a bog, and then the bog was drained and they took a flamethrower to the 57 Chevy to dry it off. You can see yourself as the protagonist of these super popular videos, but I don't think anybody out there is watching an RBMK reactor simulation construction video because they too want to know how to put one in their basement. So, is it the tremendous commitment? Is it the fact that the RBMK reactor is kind of notorious and it's not focusing on one of the other fission reactors, which didn't have so many, catastrophic failures. And it's that weird kind of like second order danger, even though the console is not connected to anything, nothing bad could happen. Or is it just that it's a monumental pet project and we're all secretly hoping that, maybe they'll move on to make an obscure, massive thing that I really care about?
The first question I have is, will this bring down my electricity bills? Or will it end up with my own home-based version of Fallout?
That is the nuclear fission question, isn't it?
The latter.
Yeah. Before I go on to say what I was going to say to answer your question, I want to point out that the aesthetic involved with nuclear power plants from 50 years ago, if you look at films and TV from around that point where they're set in the future, that's the aesthetic they use for computers from then on. And you can so obviously date things by these dials and knobs and all the rest of it instead of screens that you see, mostly instead of screens you see in fiction that's based on that. So going back to this is always interesting. But I think we are drawn to the danger of it. We're drawn to the danger of nuclear explosions and all the rest of it. But we're also drawn to the power and the engineering involved. I mean, these were engineering marvels, and that's what's shown when they look at the computing side of it. Even aside from the nuclear fission side of it, the computing side of it is incredible. And we've all watched these narrated clips of steel mills where you see the liquid metal being poured and it looks like soup into these huge vats, and then it solidifies and the hydraulic press is stamping down on it, the sparks flying, they're telling you how much power is involved and what temperature it is. The last one I watched was train wheels being made, and it's just hammer after hammer, these huge, big industrial machines. And that kind of stuff appeals to us, all these things. Oh, look, a digger type thing.
Big machines. This whole nuclear reactor control project, for me, it's giving me Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory vibes. Sort of thing you can imagine him trying to do in his dad's shed, especially from the young Sheldon series. It's not hooked up to a real reactor, honest. But it does make me think, these bigger projects, people build things like Elite Dangerous sim rigs and stuff like that, and almost a whole spaceship in their shed. There are some pretty big backyard sheds here in Australia. And actually, Clint has a big one in the USA as well. So maybe someone could recreate the operations room from War Games, complete with the Whopper computer and huge screens that will eventually play nothing more than tic-tac-toe or maybe a nice game of chess.
Maybe the real surprise is that there aren't like hundreds and hundreds of those. That feels like the kind of thing that you'd have a lot of people working on in parallel before you could compare projects online. And then, you built one of those too?
Yeah,
I got
true.
a few of them out there. Anyway, the extensive reporting and the existence of things like the HBO dramatic series have made the, all things considered, running a nuclear reactor is kind of just a job that's a tedious grind, but it now feels like something that we all have a stake in, even if we may not all understand the science and the chain reactions of, this decision would help this, but it could hurt that. But projects like these are amazing commitments to retro tech that is the literal fabric of gigawatts of usable power worldwide still today. They help connect our natural curiosity with the understanding of how things work and how they can be used more effectively. And honestly, feels like a nice, more grounded in reality and real world outcomes topic that we could cover than, say, arguing about 8-bit platformers versus 16-bit beat 'em ups. I'd like to welcome to the roles of our Patreon subscribers this week, Third Boolean. Thank you so much for signing up. Also, Dave pointed out that after some wobbling back and forth, we have hit 12,500 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you all for signing up and following the show there. Also want to let you all know that the June episode of 260 Weeks Ago is out for Patreon subscribers. There was an issue with the link that I put in. So for the first few hours, if you were trying to click through to the YouTube video, you got the wrong one. I apologize. It is fixed now.
I just want to point out that we did get this out in June because today, as we're recording this, is the 43rd of June.
Absolutely.
We've been contacted by Letitia from the Centre for Accessibility Australia, who says, our CEO, Dr. Scott Hollier, is a fanboy and listens to your podcast every week. He's just written an opinion piece on the Commodore callback from an accessibility perspective. He loves the concept behind the phone, but as someone who is legally blind, he was disappointed by the lack of accessibility features. So we'll give you the link to that in the show notes. She also said, thanks for the great podcast. So thank you very much for your input. As someone who's had to be across accessibility and the web content accessibility guidelines for projects myself, I find this very interesting. I'm not sure if they got hold of a new Commodore phone. I don't think so. Or if they're probably making assumptions based on what Commodore has made publicly available knowledge-wise. That's my assumption there. And so they're assuming what it comes preloaded with. So all I can say is go read the article. I'm not going to make any comment on it. But they do say that as fans of the brand and the vision behind the phone, they are keen to be part of the solution and offer advice and testing. So I think that's the kind of criticism the community needs. Not, I hate this thing. But hey, guess what, guys? I've noticed a potential issue and I'm keen to help out if I can. That's fantastic. On accessibility on phones, by the way, I would highly recommend the YouTube channel, The Tommy Edison Experience. I found his channel when I was researching how on earth a totally blind person would use an iPhone. And what I found in Tommy's channel was a revelation and also incredibly funny and incredibly entertaining as well. So well worth checking him out in the notes. What I myself learned in the time learning about accessibility is a simple rule of thumb. Good accessible design benefits everyone.
Yeah, it's very easy to put accessibility as, we'll do that later. We'll look at that later. Maybe optional, nice to have. It's not enough. Yeah. In the aftermath of the PlayStation's big news last week, I don't think we want to turn this into a modern gaming channel and sit there with opinions like the whole of YouTube has. But I did want to get a brief kind of synopsis of what's happened since and how it will possibly impact future retro. There seems to have been no rowing back from Sony. They're still doing it. It's very unpopular online, and Xbox are rumoured to have a feature in development called Project Positron, which seeks to add physical discs to your digital libraries, but enable you to decouple them and then sell the disc on and pass on ownership. Which, is that a real thing they were developing, or is that a quick marketing pivot? I don't know.
I seem to remember doing that briefly when you could rent Xbox discs and ask your dashboard to rip the disc, and then you could give the disc back.
I was going to say, that sounds like just endorsed piracy, but whatever.
Yeah. I bet you this time it's not. I bet you this time it's not piracy. I bet you this time they've got it locked down. OKYam84 has also submitted a new article on Tom's Hardware saying that Chinese courts have allowed heirs to inherit a digital library. And meanwhile, Squelch411 submits a modern vintage gamer video titled "The Video Games Industry is in Turmoil," where he covers many of the things that we've touched on recently. Not only AI, memory prices, physical discs, etc., the whole thing about studios being shut down, all the rest of it. Things that are outside the scope of this podcast, as well as things that are inside the scope of this podcast. All very interesting times in the modern games industry, but I think we need to know our place, and that's talking about retro, and I guess that stretched future retro and how that goes. But yeah, all interesting stuff. On now to news and brief, and Kieran80 links us to a Generation Amiga article with news that the original PlayStation now has a 16 megabyte RAM upgrade. So this is unlikely to affect original games, depending on how they're coded. Maybe the games will be coded in such a way that they know if they're running out of memory to dump stuff and load from disks, and maybe this would help. But generally, I don't think it will do much. But maybe games can be patched to take advantage of it. But I think what it really means is homebrew games could now have an easier time of it and perhaps do things that weren't originally possible using this massive memory upgrade.
Yeah, we had that article about publishing from Unity to PlayStation 1. So if you could tell it that it's got 16 megs available, that might help some things. Meanwhile, Indigo Prime linked us to a GitHub that's been around for a little while. The creator calls it a Game Boy Advance from a parallel universe where RISC-V existed in 2001, RISC-V being a fully open source CPU architecture. It is called the RISC Boy, and the project itself is open source. Looks like it hasn't been updated in a little while, but perhaps if you get involved, it will be.
Robert Crowther has started further discussion on the legacy of the BBC Micro because he's found a report from 2013 from Nesta, an independent innovation agency / charity. They found that the target of the project was adults. And there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It keeps coming up. Trevor Keverson tells us that someone has got Linux running on the Atari Jaguar. So finally, Linux in 64-bit, because that's not been possible until now.
Via Antiques for Geeks, there is now a Commodore VIC-20 port of the Spectrum Classic Saberwolf. This port makes use of the maximum possible RAM expansion for the VIC, which has been unlocking more and more impressive ports to Commodore's entry-level machine.
Yeah, the VIC-20 is so capable with that memory expansion.
It's surprisingly capable without. Like, I'd love for us to be able to do a VIC-20 feature at some point, because it occupies such an interesting niche. When it's the top machine, it's really the top machine for some interesting reasons. Its day is super brief, but when it's out, it's really fascinating.
It's Me Thyroid links us to a Macho Nacho video where he goes to Japan to get a rare CRT. It's an NEC one and has a PC engine built in. Even Neil, formerly of this show, is involved, helping out.
And from G7VFY, there's a 1965 demonstration film of an interactive 3D environment and light pen control on an IBM System 360. This is video or a film recently unearthed and published by the Periscope Film YouTube channel. IBM is not usually credited with a lot of interface innovation, but this half-hour video depicting some very serious men and some very serious spectacles explaining very serious circuit business may convince you otherwise.
That's the kind of the vibe that you get from the nuclear stuff, I think. That kind of, and that accent, that American accent from back then, you don't get anymore. I don't know if I could do that accent any justice. But that accent from there, I love that.
And if you would like to submit stories for us to read and consider, you can send them to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. You can additionally post, upvote, downvote. Keep us busy, please.
You may well recall my mini rant when Retro Games Ltd dropped footage of the THEA1200 actually working on screen, showing what looked like the exact same carousel that we see in all their machines, running from not a production machine after all this time. Nope, it was running on an all-white prototype case, still possibly with a non-functioning keyboard. It wasn't actually possible to tell, and looking like it was made from a large bar of soap. The internet went nuts with excitement, and I'll quote myself here. I said, we're not covering it. It shows nothing of interest. But I did also say, we'll cover it in detail when they show something exciting, which I'm sure they eventually will. Well, that time has come. Kind of. They still haven't shown anything new, but they have posted a rare piece to camera presented by Stuart, the operations director at Retro Games Ltd. The video is simply titled THEA1200 July Q&A and does exactly what it says on the tin. And the answer to every question raised is a variation of yes, pretty much without exception. In brief then, the news is as follows. Workbench 3.1 will be included. So is it 3.1 that supports the larger partitions, or am I wrong on that?
You made me do Amiga research, Chris. So 3.1 does not fix the 32-bit file system issues itself. You can change file systems in a 3.1 environment and use very large drives and very large partitions and so forth. But you are still subject to the rules of thumb that are like, it's really best to keep your partitions under 4 gigs, under 2 especially. There's a maximum partition size of 2 is recommended, certainly for the boot partition. We'll link to a couple of resources on this because this has been an ongoing problem, ever since hard drives started to cross the 2 gig barrier. But no, the stock 3.1 does not fix the large volume issue. Yeah, Dave.
For non-Amiga experts, I'm sure there'd be one or two. 3.1 is, I think, the kind of was that the last kind of Commodore ROM before it took a long gap before it was 3.1.4. Is that right?
Yes. Basically, 3.1 was developed at Commodore. Commodore went bankrupt before they shipped it, but through the whole, I believe it was part of the ESCOM ownership process, it made it out through a third-party publisher. So it was the Commodore Amiga team that did the work, but Commodore was gone before it could ship. So it was an aftermarket update, but by the people at Commodore. So yes, the last version of the operating system done by the people that drew a Commodore paycheck.
It's still authentic. They do mention in the video that 3 would have been more authentic, but the better user experiences with 3.1. So
yeah, which was a weird qualifier that they put on that.
Yeah.
But I think they mean because the 1200 shipped with 3.0. I think that's what they meant.
Yeah.
3.1 sounds perfectly fine to me.
It's fine. We're happy with that. Right, moving on. And on that very topic, you can install any version of Workbench and run it from USB stick. So there you go. Doesn't exclude you from running your favorite version. You can set the A1200 to boot directly to Workbench if you want, rather than the carousel. Both WHD load and traditional hard drive installs are supported via USB. They're quite clear in saying they don't promise 100% compatibility with all games, but they invite people to reach out if you do find a problem, and they will investigate as much as they can. And I think that's only fair, given the sheer size of the Amiga library. This
is based on WinUAE or something or UAE at least. So it's incredibly mature emulation here. So I think they're underselling it by saying they're not sure it'll work with everything. WinUAE is so mature. This isn't new stuff. This is old emulation.
Yeah, that's right. I think they're just, you can't say 100% absolutely, because
no,
there'll be something out there that doesn't work. Yeah. They believe, in their words, they've created a very authentic looking and feeling A1200 experience in terms of the look and feel of the case, the keyboard, and everything that goes with it. And you can configure it to run as a different Amiga if you want. And they do mention the A500 and other machines, including the CD32. And that's partially because it will support OCS, ECS, AGA, and also RTG modes. And in terms of file formats, this is where it does get interesting as well. It supports WHD load, hard drive image files, ADFs, and also CD-ROM images. As well as USB controllers that we'd expect to work, you can also use original controllers using third-party adapters. So they don't produce those adapters. You'd have to source them yourself.
I think that just means you can use USB controllers, and you can use the original one if you turn it into a USB controller through an adapter.
Yeah, basically with some of the existing adapters. I've got some that go the other way, so you can use modern devices on an original Amiga. This will just be the adapters that do the reverse of that. Yeah. They also say you can use it for productivity, not just gaming. And they said they will ship some of their own productivity tools with the machine. I wasn't quite clear on the sentence, Lee rambled there, but it sounds like they've got some stuff in the pipeline and they'll ship it with the machine. And of course, the most important thing, because yes, emulation does exist. And as you say, Dave, it's quite mature. The point of this is it all just works straight out of the box. You don't have to configure it. You can just plug it in and play. So guys, this is actually a really good and very personable update from Retro Games Ltd here. What are your thoughts on these updates? And are there any surprises for you, Jason?
Well, I noticed you were trying to see if we'd actually watched the video when you said that they said yes with no exceptions, because they did put the question out there of, will it accept expansion hardware? And in a roundabout way, he said, no, of course not.
Yeah. True.
Yes, but actually no.
Yeah.
True.
Because no, it doesn't have the trapdoor slot. It doesn't have, a PCMCIA slot. So that is a major exception that they mentioned in there. In the discourse around this, I thought I would address a couple of things that I've seen people sort of bring their hands about a little bit. Some people have expressed disappointment that they're not saying exactly what the system on a chip that powers the whole thing is. I wouldn't tell you either, because all you're going to do with that information is nitpick and whine and say, well, according to my benchmark, we can't possibly do whatever thing. So I'm with RGL. It's simply not worth it. The other thing I'm noticing is that some people are not thrilled that the output maximum is 720p. And I thought about it, like on my, my very well-equipped 4000 tower, I believe the most I ever, did out of it was 1280 by 1024 on whatever CyberGrafx card I had. And yes, it's true, 720p does not have as many pixels as 1280 by 1024. That's true. But 720p is pretty good for the types of productivity things that you are likely to want to do on an Amiga. So I don't think you're being shortchanged too much by that. I get it. 1920 by 1080 is more is more. But you're not being shorted too terribly much. I
thought RTG was a big deal. I appreciate, it's been in when UAE. Jason pointed out when UAE forever, but I thought RTG in one of these is a big deal. Indicates there's at least something beefy inside there. The system, the chip isn't just what it used to be. We don't know what it is, but it indicates it's got a bit of grunt to it. Jason?
I wonder if that's true, and I genuinely don't know the answer, because like the Amiga chipset, like the whole business of how it operates became so alien compared to how, chunky graphics that, is essentially the thing that came to define everything. And so I don't actually know. It may be harder to emulate the way that, say, the AGA chipset works than to emulate just an S3 Verge, the type of 2D, chunky graphics chip that is the type of thing that you're emulating when you're enabling Picasso 96 or CyberGrafx, retargetable graphics mode. So I'm actually not sure it's any harder.
So you switch this across to RTG and it goes, I can relax now.
Maybe.
That may be the case. I would be interested to know if we know anybody that's in the UAE development community or that has another way to benchmark this, because it may actually be easier.
It's a good point. I was nice to see a face behind Retro Games Limited. Nice to see him respond to things. It's such a short video. There's so much information packed into it. I am impressed, though, with what they've gone from. The C64 Mini was the first carousel they had, and they've now gone to saying, look, we want to do the full Amiga. We don't want to just have it turn on and give you a list of 25 games, and if you want to do anything else, you have to bend over backwards, and it doesn't really like doing it, but it will do it. This sounds as if they said, no, we want to be able to give people a proper Amiga just like what they had. And it's still system on a chip emulation, but as I said before, that emulation is fantastic. WinUE is extremely mature. It does Amigas really well. So this is going to be an inexpensive way to have what is a full-fat Amiga that does lots of things. It will run faster as well, so it'll take the edge off some of the slower 3D games and so on. So yeah, I'm really impressed with this. It's not for me. I've got my perfect Amiga here already. I don't need a second one. But I can't fault this. It seems absolutely fantastic.
I think the thing that's made me pause and think is the option for loading hard drive files. I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. In theory, I could image my fully loaded real A1200 and boot that same image up in the THEA1200, and that's pretty cool. Other news tacked onto the end of the video is that they've gone gold with the firmware and they've started production in China. While I'd have loved to have seen a production case with working workbench demo, this video fills me with excitement regardless, and I can't wait for this thing to actually hit the shops. This is the kind of update I was hoping for. So thanks, Stuart and the Retro Games Ltd team, and thanks, Reddit user Desktop Dynamite, for letting us know. It couldn't have been a more fitting username for this story. It's time now for our community question of the week. And last week's question was, what modern game do you think should have the honour of being the last physical game to exist, and why? So we are out of question mode. Who's got the top answer, guys? Dave?
The top answer is from It's Me Thyroid, and he says, go out with a hamper. A hamper?
Go out with a hamper. Hamper full of laundry.
Yeah, a hamper, yeah. Here's your Christmas hamper. Marmalade and
Beautiful.
expensive biscuits that aren't quite as good as normal ones. No, go out with a whimper, says It's Me Thyroid. Barbie, horse ride and rescue.
How do you know that that's a game, mate? That's hilarious. Jason, who's up next?
Yeah, this is a rare episode in which we don't hear from Pajako6502 until the question of the week, but he chimes in with Thimbleweed Park, a re-release of the original physical version with all the extras and feelies. It was the last game I bought. I backed the Kickstarter where I connected with it on a level that was more than just buying it. It was a game I helped bring to life in a very, very tiny way. Both my son and stepson are named in it, and you can read Pajako's comment for the rest of the info here. But yeah, good to make sure we got Paul in here before the...
Oh, we follow-up comment as well. He got to meet Ron Gilbert.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Did not know about that. Richard Shears is up next. He says, my initial thoughts, Skyrim. I fear I might still be playing it on my deathbed. Then he says, I should, however, I might have to go with Doom, just due to its legacy. Honestly, don't think anything has changed the gaming industry as much as that game. Oh, and I also really, really enjoyed it, which is a boon. And now I have doomed this comment to all the downvotes. I'll shut up. It's all right.
Just squeaked in third place.
I doomed it from how I read it out. But
Simply
you won't know that until the
shared.
outtakes.
I think the right answer here is GTA 6, perhaps, because PlayStation have said that 2027 releases will still be on disc. That's changing. The deadline is 2028. So anything coming out next year, GTA 6, a few people have said that. Half-Life 3 says Take Me It Easy UK.
Yeah, spotted that one.
E.T. says Dizzy Age because the soil needs more silicon. Lots of answers there. Do we have a new question for this week?
We do indeed. This week's question of the week is, who would you invite to your virtual retro arcade?
Put on the headset. Who's to your left? Who's to your right? As you fight down the queasy feeling of being in your VR headset.
You can get used to it,
Anyone
Jason.
you like.
Put more hours in.
Anyone you like, invite anyone you like, alive or dead, as long as you don't change that.
I like it. And where would they go to give us their answers, Dave?
They would send the answer on a postcard to a physical address which doesn't exist, or alternatively, they can go to our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. And thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope you had a good week. We'll see you again next week. And thank you for your support.
Some of us will see you next week anyway.
Some of us?
Some of us. We have a guest next week.
Oh,
Do we?
we're all waving.
We do.
Okay.
We're waving.
I'm waving. We're all waving.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.